I think the biggest threat that we face now is extremism in any form. It's the spread of ideas outside the regular political domain. And this has many causes, many root causes, which we need to address.
I want to start by asking you your point of view. We've just seen a landslide Conservative victory in the UK, based on a campaign predominantly run on the idea of getting Brexit done. What does that mean for the United Kingdom in your point of view? What does that mean for the European Union?
It's not up to me to discuss the politics of the British election, but the result seems to be that Brexit will be done. And as sad as we find that, and as I personally find that, if that's the will of the British people, then it will happen. I think it removes some uncertainty that has built up over the past months. So I understand that in Brussels there's some relief as to the clarity of the signal.
Sure. And one of the things you talked there about the will of the British people, from the results of what we're seeing is there's a generational divide that's between a youth population that wanted to remain in Europe and has certain priorities that differ from that older generation. And we see something similar in terms of a generational divide in this part of the world, in the Middle East as well. Is that an issue you're sort of witnessing across the world? And how do we fix that? How do we seem to transition between this youth generation and the older generation?
I think we have to reassert ourselves as the European Union, and the new Commission offers this opportunity now. We have to make sure that we know and we project who we are, what we want, what we stand for, our experience, our project. What is it? What is it that, in our view, has brought to Europe an unprecedented time of peace and prosperity, that is much more than an economic zone, that is a political project that has overcome many divisions, fault lines and conflicts that have played over the century.
And does this, the UK stepping away from that then, does that belittle that cause ever so slightly in the eyes of our global counterparts in the US and China, potentially parts of the Middle East?
I wouldn't say that, no. It's a free choice, and Europe stands for free choice. It's certainly not up to us to teach the oldest democracy of the world how to make choices. No, it's an option.
Let's talk then about post-Brexit European Union in the Middle East. You mentioned a few things there about the European Union which we feel so strongly about. Freedom of speech, freedom of movement, that togetherness. There's parts of the Middle East that are really struggling at the moment. Does this instability lessen the impact we can have in the Middle East at the moment, and what needs to be done to strengthen that in terms of taking care of some of these very, very important issues that need attention in the Middle East?
I believe Europe can play a very positive role also in overcoming these divisions and showing that for everybody is better off cooperating with each other. Regional organizations such as the Gulf Cooperation country are so important. Now there's, I would say, the need and the opportunity also, because the number of international actors of this magnitude is not that big, and the European Union is a quite large block of countries and population, and it could, and I think it should project this in a positive way and offer its services and offer whatever it can do to help others overcome this and serve as, I don't want to say guarantor, because this is probably not what the world order in the 21st century is about, but a positive actor, a positive contribution to stability, to cohesion, to cooperation. And with some of the mechanisms we have also quite practically, down to the level of training security sector in some more fragile countries of the Middle East.
Is Europe doing enough to contribute at the moment?
I think we're never doing enough. I think we could do a lot more, and we will be doing a lot more. And the new president of the new Commission has laid out an ambitious agenda for what the European Union should do. And the new High Representative for External Affairs has done the same, has given out his first impressions at the Foreign Affairs Council last week. I think this is a pretty ambitious agenda, and rightly so. We should do that. We can do it.
And what about America's involvement? America's involvement in the last few years seems to have been turning a little bit insular. The focus is more domestic, more nationalist. Has that had an impact on the influence they're having in the Middle East? And do you think they need to, again, or at least candidates moving forward into 2020 need to have more of a stronger focus on the Middle East?
I think my counterparts and most analysts on the US Middle East policy agreed that it is not only this, but also the previous administrations which have started a change in the way the United States are engaged in the Middle East by taking a strategic 360-degree look at the world. And obviously Asia, China has become relatively more important than it was 20, 30 years ago. So it's only natural to adapt to changing realities, which means from a geographical point of the United States, it is still the biggest power around in the world, but it does not play the same role on the ground anymore, which means a gradual adjustment of its position in the Middle East, which doesn't mean, as my American counterparts will tell you, that the US withdraws, but it's a readjustment. So we should do the same. We should, as Europe, look around 360 degrees, find that our transatlantic relationship is by far the most important. Certainly after Brexit, the one to Great Britain will be our immediate concern. And if you look around the Middle East, and in most European languages, it's really called the Near East because it's so near, is our neighborhood. And this should be a focus for us, quite clearly. So we should do more, not only because the United States are doing less, but because if we look around, this is our neighborhood.
Because you've been working in this region, you know the Middle East well. It's a region that people in the West particularly just don't seem to understand the complexity of it on the ground. For you, what is the most pressing item in the Middle East at the moment? If you could go back to your counterparts, in the UK, in the US, and say we need a stronger focus on this, what would that be?
I think the biggest threat that we face now is extremism in any form. It's the spread of ideas outside the regular political domain. And this has many causes, many root causes which we need to address. But we also need to look at the political space itself. We need to provide this space for people to articulate their grievances, and we must be honest to do something about them. And then we can counter the temptation and also the room to spread extremism. Because it is very much like a regular political party or even as a company. It needs a market to flourish. Obviously there's demand for it. So if we can compete with these extremist tendencies and provide better offers, better products, better governance, better ideas, a more positive narrative, which is more attractive, then I think we can together address this large challenge. So it's reinforcing. We should work together to break out of this cycle, and there is really a better narrative.
And the final question I'll ask you then is, it didn't seem like long ago that the Trump presidency was celebrating the kind of end of ISIS. There seems to be talk of some kind of resurgence here that's on the agenda, it's on our radar. What is it about this ideology that seems to be so powerful still, and are we any closer to solving that issue at the moment? Particularly with the void that's opening up with the kind of reduction of American influence in that part of the region.
I think the void is a good place to start. We cannot afford ungoverned spaces anywhere in the world. That also applies to the Middle East. We need to bundle our efforts to get governance back into these spaces, get governance back into where ISIS flourishes, and effectively compete with the offers, with the narratives. And of course, not everything can be resolved in a political way. In the end, some very extreme elements such as Daesh have to be fought with other means. But the larger challenge is to get governance going, which seems also to be the question in the region for the past 10 years, for the decade. We can do that. Europe, to come back to Europe, is maybe a little dull, a little bureaucratic. We're not as shiny as some other models, but we're very good at governance.
Yeah.
We're very good at rooting out corruption, at providing transparency for our citizens, to sometimes over-regulate, but many of the complaints that are voiced on Arab streets, we have practical answers. We've been there. Speaking of complexity, it's hard to beat European complexity. We know what it is about, and I think we can understand, we can relate, we can sympathize, and we can actually help.